Ay, pag-mute ng sound, walang sound.
In the digital age, data plays a huge role in our everyday lives. It's present in lots of obvious ways, when we're shopping online, for example, and have to type in our name and address. But data collection can also be less visible. Take data brokers, for example. You've probably never heard of them, but these businesses specialize in creating in-depth profiles of individuals for advertisers. A single profile might draw on up to 1,500 data points. This can include a person's sexuality, browsing history, political affiliation, and even medical records. One US-based data broker, Axiom, claims to have files on 10% of the world's population. It's not just businesses, of course. In 2013, Edward Snowden uncovered a vast regime of mass government surveillance programs, opening a global conversation which is still unfolding today. In this video, we'll take a closer look at this debate, focusing on the related but distinct concepts of privacy and data protection. By the end, you should have a clear idea of how these issues differ and overlap, how both are affected by the digital age, and how you can engage with companies and governments to protect and strengthen these rights. So what are we talking about when we say privacy and data protection? Let's take privacy first. Article 12 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights treats privacy as a distinct human right. It says that no one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence. Everyone has the right to the protection of the law against such interference or attacks. This is simple enough. Agreeing on what privacy actually means here has proved harder. Depending on the context, it can mean the right to freedom of thought and conscience, the right to be left alone, the right to control one's own body, the right to protect your reputation, the right to a family life, or the right to a sexuality of your own definition. There are other ambiguities. In legal terms, privacy isn't an absolute right. This means it can be restricted for certain reasons, for example, to protect national security or public safety, or if it conflicts with other rights, like the right to free expression. An example could be a public figure invoking privacy to avoid disclosing their financial records. And what about data protection? Contrary to popular belief, it is not the same thing as privacy. Privacy is a broad concept referring to the conditions which enable a basic foundation of human dignity and autonomy. Data protection is more specific. It's concerned with the ways third parties handle the information they hold about us, how it is collected, processed, shared, stored, and used. In other words, privacy is the big picture and data protection is one corner of it. Like privacy, data protection is also subject to limits. For example, when a warrant is obtained allowing law enforcement to access the phone records of a suspect. And while data protection is in some ways more clearly defined than privacy, how it is applied legally can still vary greatly depending on which country you're in. The digital age has created new ways to collect, access, analyze, and use data, often across multiple borders and jurisdictions. Unsurprisingly, this poses challenges for human rights. One challenge relates to the way companies use our data. The Internet's business model depends on people sharing their personal data in exchange for access to content, services, and social media platforms. While you might not pay anything upfront to go on Facebook, they still make money from you by selling your personal information to advertisers. By clicking Agree to Terms of Service, users technically consent to this model. But in practice, virtually no one actually reads them. This is a problem because no one knows what they're really signing up to, which creates opportunities for misuse. Another challenge relates to the collection of personal data by governments. Technological developments now enable governments to monitor our conversations, transactions, and the locations we visit. In some countries, including Russia, Brazil, Australia, and South Korea, companies are legally required to store this data locally for long periods of time, making it easier for governments to get information on their citizens. These measures are often introduced in the name of fighting cybercrime and terrorism. But without adequate protections, this data can easily be abused to target dissidents and activists, undermining freedom of expression and the rights to association and assembly. And these are just the technologies we have now. Emerging technologies like the Internet of Things, wearables, and artificial intelligence are likely to pose new challenges to human rights. As human rights defenders, we need to be prepared for these. There are many bodies and forums where privacy and data protection issues are discussed and defined. National and regional courts have a crucial role here. The European Court of Human Rights, for example, has imposed limits on stop and search practices by the police and on the amount of time data can be legally retained. At the national level, it's common to find a specific public body responsible for privacy and data protection. This can be a specialist post or an ombudsman. But the extent to which privacy is defined and protected varies greatly between different jurisdictions. For example, there is no clear right to privacy in the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. However, there are mechanisms at the international level. Following a UN resolution on the right to privacy in the digital age, the Human Rights Council has established a new special rapporteur for privacy, and various Internet policy forums like the Internet Governance Forum, the Council of Europe, the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, and conferences like HOPE and Sci-Fi also contribute to shaping the scope of privacy in the digital age. And finally, we have companies. The decisions of companies can also have a huge impact on data protection and privacy rights. For example, by building end-to-end encryption into their software, as WhatsApp did in early 2016. Let's look at two examples of privacy and data protection in the real world. First, let's look at the Apple versus FBI case. After the 2016 terrorist attacks in the US city of San Bernardino, the FBI asked Apple for the information stored on the iPhone of one of the suspects. However, Apple's operating system is encrypted and only accessible through a PIN code. The FBI asked Apple to modify the system to let them in. Apple refused, opening a lively debate on the right to privacy versus security needs. The case was almost taken to court, but in the end, the FBI found a vulnerability to crack the phone. In privacy terms, this was a legal setback. If the case had gone to court, it could have helped popularize the risks of weakening encryption for society and establish what constitutes a legitimate limitation on privacy by the state. Next, let's look at surveillance in Kenya. In Kenya, a combination of invasive surveillance measures and a lack of adequate data protection facilitated a crackdown on civil society in 2013, which was documented by Peace Brigades International. Many human rights defenders had their offices raided, computers hacked, and phones tapped by the government. One of the ways human rights defenders have been fighting back is by pushing for the ratification of Kenya's first data protection law, long stalled in Parliament. If implemented properly, this could limit the worst excesses of state surveillance. Kenya is by no means the only country to bring in surveillance legislation justified by security concerns. But this example is a good demonstration of how seemingly abstract restrictions on online privacy can have physical consequences in the offline world. So, what can human rights defenders do to protect and strengthen privacy and data protection? An easy first step is taking digital security measures yourself. This can be as simple as using encryption and anonymity tools and encouraging your friends to do the same. Human rights defenders can also advocate for alternative digital business models, which aren't based on the extraction and sale of data. Economic pressure on the existing model is already growing. For example, over the last few years, the number of users using ad-block software globally has exploded. There is pressure, and this is already pushing companies to less invasive advertising practices. Engagement in debates at the national and regional level is, of course, crucial. Where privacy protections are weak, human rights defenders need to actively advocate for stronger ones. And even where they are stronger, we need to make sure legislation is keeping up with new technological developments, like the Internet of Things. Ultimately, if we want things to change, human rights defenders need to make these issues accessible and relatable by being more creative about the way we talk about them. When people see how data protection and privacy affects them on a day-to-day basis, they may be more inclined to engage with these concepts. In the next video, we'll be taking a closer look at freedom of expression, association, and peaceful assembly.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christine Malones from Learning Innovation Hub PH. Today, we will be discussing what are the data privacy risks in human resources. We will talk about what are the common data privacy
Ano
risks
yan, ma'am?
that are present in your
Ulit.
organization, what the
Halak talaga
government
yung
is
kukunin
saying
ko.
about helping companies to protect them in those kinds of data
Yung
privacy
halak talaga
breaches,
yung
and
kukunin
some
ko.
tips that you can do in order to mitigate those types
Tapos,
of risk.
Ilagay mo siya dun sa plastic or any malinis na container. And then, yung nasa tube, ihalo mo
Before we formally start, let me just discuss with you some reminders about this info session. Number one, your microphones are automatically muted so that to avoid unnecessary noise that may distract our session this morning. Number two, the session will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube pages, Cosane Consulting and Learning Innovation Hub PH. We are giving you our consent to share the recordings to your employees, workmates, and friends. Number three, for those who are interested to have certificates, we will send the link where you can retrieve your certificates in our chat box. Number four, we are encouraging everyone to ask questions. You can raise your hand to be acknowledged, and we will be unmuting your microphone. You can also type your questions in our chat box. Number five, unanswered questions will be read and answered towards the end of the training session. Number six, this session can also be streamed via Cosane Consulting and Learning Innovation Hub PH Facebook pages. Participants who registered but failed to log in via Zoom may go to our social media pages to stream the webinar. And number seven, if you have any questions, please feel free to send us a message on the chat box in this Zoom platform. And now, we would like to get to know who are the participants in this platform. With this, we will be using the Mentimeter survey. I hope you are already familiar with this platform. For those who are unfamiliar, Mentimeter is a survey tool where we will be asking questions about the participants. Mentimeter does not collect any personal information, and all of your responses are gathered collectively. Okay, I will now open the Mentimeter platform. To access the online survey, please use your secondary device such as mobile phone, laptop, or tablet. Then, open your internet browser. Once you have opened your internet browser, please type in www.menti.com and enter the code 78273675. Again, that's 78273675. Once you are on the platform, kindly click on the thumbs up sign for us to know that you are ready to participate in this activity. For those who are streaming via Cosane Consulting and Learning Innovation Hub PH Facebook page, you can also participate by going to www.menti.com. Okay, we will start. We will start the Mentimeter survey as soon as we reach 50. All right, let's start. First question. We would like to know the sex of the participants in this meeting. Please type in your answers. Okay, let's go now to the second questions. I would like to ask the position or designation of the participant. Please type in your answer. Okay, I see that most of our participants are HR assistant and managers. All right. So we would like to know and to understand what industry you belong to. Please type in your answer. Please do not write a specific business trade as it will be asked in the next question. Oh, I see that are most of our participants from the industry of mining. Okay, let's go now to the business trait. Kindly type, what is your business trait? Next is, I'm interested to know how many participants here are streaming via Zoom or Facebook. Please select your answers. Okay, next question is, we would also like to know your current data privacy problem. Please type in your answers. Okay, current data privacy problems are such as policy and procedures have not established firm guidelines yet for our firm, confidentiality, sustaining DPA compliance, implementation of DPA in HR system, manual HR system, compliance requirements, and differentiate between personal information, sensitive personal information, and privileged information. Okay, this one is interesting. Remote team guidelines use time tracking software to be installed in personal equipment. Storaging of files, yes. And most of the problems are confidentiality. This one also, CVs of job applicants who are not selected for hiring. Compliance to pandemic regulation, very timely. The policies and procedure with confidentiality, exaggerated DPA. Ideal number of years in keeping data, we will discuss this later. Retention of sharing of data, okay. DPA in HRIS. Thank you for answering our current data problems, your suggestion. Lastly, I would like to know your learning expectations. Please type in your answers for your learning expectations. Some are expecting that HR has a huge role in implementing data privacy, deeper understanding of the subject, in depth knowledge in DPA, learning how DPA affects to the company. Also, they want to broaden my knowledge regarding my data privacy in HR. Better implementation of data privacy in our policies. How to strengthen our current practices. Limitation of DPA. Proper DPA implementation, its retentions, rules, policies, and instructions and utilization. So we are more expecting about the DPA policy.
Okay, so we go ahead, got your answer. So let's now proceed to the introduction of this.
All right, we got all your answers. Thank you everyone for actively participating in this activity. And now I would like to introduce our speaker for this morning. Our speaker is an enterprise information security senior consultant profile. He has a total of 13 years experience in the field of information technology applied in different industries such as banking institution, manufacturing, human resource management, IT BPO, non-bank financial institutions, health and government. He also performed the functions of the Data Protections Officer and Compliance Officer for privacy and implement end-to-end compliance activities based on the National Privacy Commission's compliance framework, as well as international compliance methodologies for several industries such as IT BPO, government agency, LGUs, pre-need insurance, health maintenance organization, contact center shared services, maritime mining companies, hospitals, pharmaceuticals, and financial services. Without further ado, I would like to give the platform to Mr. Ernest Oxon. Sir, the platform is yours.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Yeah, and so from the Mentimeter activity that Ms. Christine just conducted, I see that we have several questions, diba? Concerns regarding the compliance or our compliance, the requirements of the DPA. Okay. So with that, we'll go through our presentation today. We'll try to answer some, if not most, of your questions that you posted, di ba? I see na may mga tanong na, paano ba mag-comply, di ba? Ano ba yung mga policies, ano ba yung mga principles ng data privacy? Sige. With that, yeah. Yeah. Can everyone see my slide?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So, hello again, good morning. With me is Charm. She's with Cosing Consulting as well. She's also a data privacy compliance analyst with me. So we'll go through the presentation. So mamaya during the question and answer agenda or part of the presentation, we'll be discussing, answering your questions. So if there are questions that we were not able to tackle, we'll dive into that in the Q&A portion of our presentation. Okay. With that, let me just explain muna. So si Learning Innovation Hub, tsaka si Kuseng. So Learning Innovation Hub is a company that deals with providing learning and technology solutions, diba, for Philippines and Vietnam. Diba? The mission of Learning Innovation Hub is to help micro, small, and medium enterprises, diba, provide quality, diba, effective organizational learning and innovative technology solutions. Okay. So Kuseng naman delves into GRC, the governance, risk, and compliance domain. Diba? And part of that domain is the data privacy compliance. So what we espouse is we we do multiple multidisciplinary and holistic approaches to all of our services, to all of our compliance services, and we empower organizations, diba? We build the capacity for them to continue their compliance programs and build and establish a culture of security and privacy in organizations. Diba? By creating customized compliance roadmaps for them. Kasi iba-iba yung nagiging how each company complies, diba? How the strategy or the approach of each company with compliance to data privacy, data protection regulations. So as mentioned by Ms. Christine earlier, COSAID has these client engagements ever since we started, online retail, government information systems, maritime manning, credit insurance. Diba? So yeah. So this is our agenda for today. Diba? Uh, we'll do a basic recap on data privacy, diba? And then we'll tackle basically yung pinaka agenda natin for this morning's webinar, the data privacy risks in HR. And towards the end, we'll discuss our takeaway points na siguro our springboard. How can we start our data privacy compliance, diba? Program, strategies, and approaches. Kasi I believe that was one of the questions that was posted earlier and during the pre-registration. Diba? How can we actually start our compliance? So as a recap, as the name implies, this is not necessarily a data privacy awareness session. Okay, just to set the expectations. Okay, most likely by now you've heard, read, saw a video about our data protection or data privacy regulations, which is the Data Privacy Act of 2012 or the Republic Act number 10173. You may, some of us may even have attended the Privacy Awareness Week or Data Privacy Council meetings conducted by or hosted by the National Privacy Commission in the past months and even weeks. So the reason why we're here, so malamang narinig na natin siya. We know there's a law that requires us to protect personal data of individuals. So now it's the question, okay, what's our understanding of that law? Diba? How do we interpret that? So the purpose of this recap, the objective of this recap is for us to be in the same page of our understanding, diba? And if you may, our interpretation, diba, of this law para in the context of this webinar, in the context of data privacy risks in HR. Diba? So yun yung focus natin. So to start off, the law, the data privacy regulation, protects information of individuals. Okay? So what it classifies as confidential is personal data. So personal data of whom? Diba? Customers, personnel, partners, managers, as you can see in the slide. But aside from that, personal data of our applicants, diba? In an HR domain perspective. Of applicants, diba? Employees, former employees, diba? Some HR departments also process the personal data of consultants, diba? Third-party service providers, external partners, diba? So nasa HR then often yung personal data of these individuals. So the law protects the personal data of them, diba? Of us, even employees, tayo rin, diba? So when I say personal information, diba, of individuals, I believe this was one of the questions earlier in the Mentimeter. Diba? What constitutes of personal information? The personal information, diba, is anything that we can use to identify someone. Diba? May it be a singular piece of information or a group of information when put together can identify an individual. That's personal. Okay? So if through a name, first name, last name, diba? An address siguro, diba? Or a phone number, even a birthday, when collected together, we can identify now, oh, this is that person. So that's personal already. Privileged information is just information between two people, two entities, diba? Attorney-client, doctor-patient. Diba? This is as defined also by the National Privacy Commission. So sensitive personal information are more specific. Diba? So it includes health records, diba? Medical records, education, work, diba? Religion, age, diba? Even philosophical and political affiliations, and of course yung mga government IDs natin. These are all sensitive. So it begs the question, why are these sensitive? Diba? Bakit ito sensitive yung isa personal? Kasi if ever these sensitive information were actually stolen, diba? There was a breach in sensitive personal information of individuals. The risks for that individuals are higher. Okay, that's why they're tagged as sensitive. Okay, yeah, that's one way to perceive it. Meron po nag-chat. So wait lang po. Where can we classify the home address? Is it sensitive, personal? Or... Sige, we'll go through your questions probably after. Let's just run through the recap. Thank you for your question, Miss Silva. Masasagot natin siya in a while. Okay. Charm pa note na lang siguro ng questions. So when it comes to accountability or protecting personal information, data protection regulation says that organizations, companies are responsible for all the personal data under its custody. Either we collected them ourselves or we were able to collect them through other organizations as well. It was shared to us. As long as it's in our custody, it's in our uh, possession, we have the responsibility to protect it. Just to clarify, we are not necessarily the owners of this personal information. The owners of the personal data are still the individuals. We are merely the controllers or the processors of this information. Now, when it comes to accountability, data protection regulations demands internal accountability. When you say demands internal accountability, we need to put in place security measures to protect these personal data. And the law, even our DPA, requires us to maintain comprehensive records of data processing systems. Ito yung tinawag na Data Processing Systems Inventory or DPS Inventory, if you've heard of that term before. So it's just a list of all the process that we do, operations, day in, day out, that involves personal data. Okay? So when you say process, this is a misconception na narinig ko pag process, use lang. So pag store, hindi na siya process. That's a misconception. Kasi when you say process, it pertains to collection, usage, store, and even the disclosure of personal data. So yun yung tinatawag natin na process. So if we do any of those on personal data, so we now need to include that in our DPS inventory, implement security measures to protect these personal data. Now, when protecting personal data, there are some provisions of the DPA. So, ang sabi, ultimately, the company is responsible, like I said earlier, responsible to protect personal data. However, in a company, the head of the organization is ultimately the accountable. Accountability falls on the head of the organization. Now, where does the data protection officer or the DPO come in? The DPO, as per the DPA, ensures that the company is continuously complying to the DPA, to data protection regulations. It's ensuring that continues yung ating compliance program. Okay, that's where the DPO comes in. However, and I met several companies already. We've met several companies already that if the DPO acts alone without the support of management, his or her peers, or even the entire company, the DPO resigns from that position, withdraws from the DPO role itself. Kasi nahihirapan siya if you may, there's a saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Okay? In data protection, data privacy regulations compliance, it takes an entire organization to comply with data protection regulations. So often, it needs a compliance team. Kailangan may support team si DPO. Or a compliance team and an incident response team to be able to ensure that the entire organization is compliant. Especially for relatively bigger organizations. Now, if if our organization is more lean, ganun din eh. We still need the help of our fellow employees, fellow managers, officers, team leads, to comply. Now, yung PIC and PIP at the bottom, yung Personal Information Controller and Personal Information Processors, these are external partners to whom we share information with or get information from, or sometimes we outsource, or outsource our processing of personal data, or sometimes the personal data processing is outsourced to us. So yun siya. Now, when it comes to penalties, meron lang sinabi butas na if you're processing personal data without the consent or permission of the individuals, that's processing for unauthorized purposes, unauthorized processing. So if we process, if there's a breach, an unauthorized access to personal data, that's also a violation. improper disposal, it begs the question, how secure are we disposing documents, physical and electronic, that contains personal data? Or rather, or another question would be, do we dispose of them at all? Diba? So yun yung proper disposal. When it comes to concealment of breaches, if we do encounter an incident, security incident or personal data breach, uh, what do we do? Do we address them? Do we manage them? And based on the criteria for mandatory data breach notification, according to NPC Circular 1603, uh, do we notify the National Privacy Commission or even the data subjects if we encounter these breaches? Pag hindi, concealment ng breach siya. Okay? Or of course, unauthorized or malicious disclosure. Diba? Personal data was disclosed, shared, diba? Maliciously without authority. Diba? So all of these penalties, according to the DPA, would amount to a maximum, would amount to fines and imprisonment. So yung maximum fine is lumalabas mabot ng 5 million. And yung maximum years of imprisonment is 7 years. Okay. There was a question before na yung penalties pa natin ng DPA focuses on fine or imprisonment. Other laws kasi ganun siya. For our DPA, Data Protection Regulation, it's fine and imprisonment. Okay. Or NPC can just issue cease and desist orders to companies to stop the processing of personal data. Okay. So yan yung mga penalties regarding this one. So when we say the DPO, diba, appointing a DPO, in Circular 1701, 1701 of National Privacy Commission, there is a criteria for mandatory registration. We need to register our company and our data protection officer with the NPC. Now, the conditions are here. So, if we have at least 250 employees, diba, or at least processing 1,000 individuals, diba, we need to register our DPOs to the NPC. Or NPC identified 10 sectors. Diba? So, meron government agencies, diba? Kasi may tanong during the pre-registration is the DPA, does the DPA cover the government or government agencies, diba? It does. So financial institutions, telco, BPOs, diba? Higher education institutions, schools, colleges, universities, to an extent, training centers, diba? Tapos, hospitals, of course, kasi health yung kailangan pina-process. Insurance providers, direct marketing, and pharma. Now, yung 10th dito, yung personal information processor. If we provide services, processing personal data for other companies, then we are a PIP, or in personal information processor. Diba? If we process personal data on behalf of other companies, diba? External partners. So yun. So if we belong to these sectors, or we have at least 250 employees, or processing 1,000 individuals, we need to register DPO. Now, often people would think, or companies would think, I met several already, presidents, executives, oh, I don't have 250 employees. We're not processing 1,000 individuals. We don't belong in these sectors. Does this mean that I don't need to comply with the Data Privacy Act? That's a very good example of a common misconception. Okay, these criteria only state that we need to register our. If we fall on these criteria, we need to register our DPOs. But if we don't, we still need to comply, with the Data Privacy Act. So we need to register. We need to appoint our data protection officer. We may not need to register the person, but we need to still appoint and then comply. Ito kasi nakalagay dito is mandatory registration. Clear? So I do hope we get to clarify that, because it's often a question na, oh, I don't belong in any of these criteria conditions, so I don't need to comply. So again, it's a great example of a common misconception. So when it comes to complying, diba, yung risk for non-compliance, often yung highlighted is yung fines and imprisonment or yung cease and desist. But operationally, and that's what we want to approach the entire DPA in an operational standpoint, especially in HR. Diba? The risk is this one, diba? Disruptions to our day-to-day work. Why is it disruptive? Because when you encounter security incidents or breaches, the personal data breaches, what we need to do, diba? What the law requires, is for us to be able to address them, diba? Mitigate them, resolve them, diba? And if ever, inform the National Privacy Commission, diba? Inform our data subjects. Now we were and we encounter these breaches. So that takes away time from us to perform our actual functions, diba? Our actual operations, our actual business. So, yung extortion, that can actually also relate to the business email compromise. Kasi business email compromises. Ito yung, we get emails from people that would impersonate siguro suppliers, di ba? External partners, and would ask us to pay them, di ba? Kung supplier sila. Uh, and if we're not performing due diligence, di ba? If we're not vigilantly reviewing the email threads that we receive, often, pag nakita ng ganyan email, we just blindly pay them. So, why do I mention that? Kasi it's a recurring incident in companies. Locally, there's one company who paid 80,000 pesos to the wrong supplier. Because nakakuha siya ng email, akala niya yun yung supplier nila. May bank account na nilagay. Nagbayad sila. Na-realize nila, a week later, ibang pala yung supplier na pinadalan. Iba pala yung supplier na binayaran. Uh, there's another company who paid $30,000 to the wrong partner. Kasi na-compromise na pala yung kanilang email. Diba? Na-hacking email nila, nagpadala ng email, so they actually paid that amount. So, again, it begs the question, how often do we check, kunyari, yung recipient line of our email? Diba? Often, if we type in the first 3 letters, our email would suggest already a recipient, then we just press enter, then without necessarily reading the rest of the characters in that email address, we just send an email, and then yun na. So, magkakamali na agad tayo in sending an email. Diba? Aside from operational disruptions, it's actually also yung negative impact to the reputation of the company. Diba? Siyempre, if we're seen as, diba, not as protecting personal data, we lose client trust, diba? Trust of our partners. Plus, of course, like I mentioned, according to Circular 1603, yung notification sa National Privacy Commission and even to your subjects. So it becomes publicized. Diba? These breaches, and often, yung media natin now are really looking for the next breach that can be posted publicly. Diba? So reputation siya. So it begs a question, diba? In an HR perspective. If an employee in our company does not necessarily secure, diba, the processing personal data, so we get to ask, is that for that employee, does he or she value the reputation of the company? Kasi pag pabaya siya sa mag-process ng kanyang personal data na sa trabaho niya, di ba? Parang it reflects badly to the company if ever a breach does occur, di ba? So it begs the question, why is that person still in our company? Kung if that person does not put top of mind yung image or reputation ng ating organizations. Di ba? So, pagdating sa in the nature perspective again, so we now need to continuously, di ba, inform our employees, our personnel. Now, we need to protect personal data, especially now, di ba? In this digital environment, di ba? Online. So, there are just levels of organizational compliance so that we're all familiar with. So, when you say willful non-compliance, there are companies who know that they need to comply with the DPA because they're processing personal data, but they refuse to comply. Sabihin lang, yun nga, di ba? Oh, wala mo 250 employees. I'm not processing 1,000 individuals. I don't belong to that sector, so I don't need to comply. Well, that's a misconception, like I said earlier. So willful non-compliance. Other companies naman do not know that there's a law already. May batas na pala na that we need to protect personal data. So be ignorant about it. And often, once they find out that there's a law about it and they still choose not to comply, they fall down to willful non-compliance. Now, for most companies who started their compliance programs, they actually end up or fall short and only reach paper compliance. When I say paper compliance, these are companies who were able to appoint a DPO, diba? Register DPO, diba? Draft their privacy manuals, diba? Post their privacy notices, though often companies tend to copy, paste from other companies of the similar industry or sector, diba? And they feel na, okay na sila, secured na sila. However, yun naman yung ating again, it's another good example of a misconception or a bad habit towards compliance. Diba? During the Data Privacy Council meetings or previous activities to NPC, they actually do regular reviews of posted privacy notices. And often they see that these posted privacy notices in websites, diba, uh, lack form and substance. Diba? Kasi it's too generic, it's too general, it's motherhood statements. It does not necessarily explain what processing is actually happening in the company, what personal data is being collected, diba? And the security measures that needs to be implemented. So, ano ba yung requirement? What does complying to data protection regulations require? It requires operational compliance. When you say operational compliance, it's uh, implementing the security measures that we have set out to do right in our privacy manuals. Diba? Oh, we say that we'll be implementing security measures, and then let's have that. Diba? Let's install that. Diba? Uh, we said that we will be implementing user uh, user access controls policies, diba? Security clearances. So let's implement those. Diba? We said that we'll be implementing NDAs. So let's have that. And we need to continuously implement and monitor the implementation and review. Kasi often, uh, yung mga security measures that we set out to do now, who's to say that in 6 months later, they're still effective? Diba? Case in point, the processes that we were accustomed to performing, diba, the security measures we have in place back in 2019, most likely they're no longer effective now. They've changed already because of the situation that we're all in, diba? When 2020 went by and now in 2021, diba? With this pandemic. Na malamang yung recruitment natin online na lang, diba? Dati pwede mag-submit pa physically, pumunta sa opisina. So there are companies who resorted to online submission ng resume. So meron ba tayong security measures on those? Diba? Sino nakaka-access ng mga resumes na pinapadala through the website? Diba? Often, ang ang email na nasa website is yung info or a generic email of the company. And these generic emails are accessed by the IT department, the HR department, marketing, diba? So it's not necessarily just the HR. So it begs the question: do they need to have access to uh, personal data of prospect applicants? Diba? Yung resumes, government IDs, siguro, transcript records, diba? So we need to review now our process. Ayun, actually, that would be that for our recap. Uh, if you have questions, again, on most likely you would have questions. Okay, how can I do that? Ano yung mga risks natin? We deal with those in our next agenda in data privacy risk in HR. So, but I do hope with the short recap that we did, again, it's not a full-blown data privacy awareness session, but it's just the objective of that is for us to be on the same page of our understanding, at least for the context of this webinar, same page of our understanding with regards to the data privacy compliance. Okay, everyone, clear pa? Again, I don't want to be too legalese about my explanation. Siguro there are participants here in our webinar na lawyers. Now, hello po. Most likely you would have a more deeper understanding of the actual law. Pero ang gusto natin kasi dito is yung operationalization, di ba? Of the compliance requirements of the DPA and the NPC. So now we dive into the data privacy risks in HR though. So when I say data privacy risks, to put in context, these are just questions, challenges, diba? Threats for the human resources functions, diba? To comply or in compliance with the data privacy regulation. Okay? So dun umiikot yung ano natin. Kasi reason why I mentioned questions, challenges, and threats kasi from the Mentimeter activity we did earlier, yun yung mga nakita natin yung mga questions ng mga tao, yung challenges nila, and even during the pre-registration, diba? For those who have registered for this webinar. Meron dong questions na, okay, so paano ba mag-comply, ano ba ang personal data, ano ba ang mga risks sa HR, kasi we also ano ba yung mga risks on human resource system, so yan, yun yung gusto natin ma-discuss in this second topic natin. So, before we dive into the risks of HR personal data, meron lang din tayo gusto idagdag na concepts, di ba? Tenets, diba? Principles of the Data Privacy Act, our Data Privacy Act. So, yeah, meron tayong tinawag na data privacy principles, di ba? CIA, this is not the CIA, the agency in US, and data subject rights. So when I say principles of data privacy, these are transparency, legitimate purpose, and proportionality. Okay. Again, not to be too legalese about it, but when you say transparency, it's being, it's informing, diba? Our data subjects, our applicants, our employees, that this is what we will be using or what we will be collecting of their personal data. Diba? When you say legitimate purpose, we actually have a purpose and declared purpose, and we told them about our purpose. Now, bakit natin pinoprocess yung personal data nila? And being proportional means we're not collecting too much information. Diba? We're just collecting information enough to satisfy the purpose, which is aligned to the purpose that we have declared. Diba? So yun siya, yun yung principles ng data privacy. When it comes to CIA, ito yung confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So, personal data needs to be confidential. Diba? Sino lang ba natin may access dun sa personal data? Especially kung HR personal data yan, who needs to have access to applicant data? Diba? To employee data or former employee data? Sino? Sino dapat? Diba? HR lang ba? There are other departments. Diba? When you say integrity, the data quality is sustained. Diba? Ayaw natin na nagbabago yung information. Unless, of course, requested by the data subjects. And in availability, just pertains to the data is accessible to those that need to process it. Also, to the data subjects themselves, especially when they request for copies of personal data that we have about them. So that's availability. When we mention data subject rights, there are actually around 8 data subject rights. So ito yung just highlighting the 3 of them. The right to be informed. So that also relates to being transparent to our data subjects. They have right to correct their data. Again, the owners of the personal data is still them, not us. All submitted documents that contains personal data about individuals are still in the ownership of the individual. They're just the controllers or the processors. Kasi it's also a misconception na pag nasubmit na sa atin, tayo na yung owner. Again, that's a misconception. And of course, they have right to damages if we encounter breaches, diba? Security incidents, which may cause physical harm, actual harm to the person, to the data subject. They have right for damages for that. Now, of these 3, ano yung mga risks natin dyan? So when it comes to data privacy principles, we run the risk of not conforming, diba, to the Data Privacy Act principles. Diba? For HR, we're not transparent with the processing that we do about the purpose of the collection of the personal data that we collect. Diba? We collect too much information. Diba? Siguro at the onset, diba, for recruitment, how many of us at the onset, at the start of the recruitment process, we already collect medical records, government IDs, diba? All of the siguro yung family background, diba? Names ng parents, names ng siblings, even their salary ranges. May ganun eh. May umabot ko, birthdays ng mga tao na yan. So, it begs the question, why do we collect those information? Diba? Ano yung purpose natin? Did we declare those purposes? So, if we don't, then yun yung hindi tayo conforming to the DPA principles. When it comes to CIA, diba? We breach the CIA. Diba? We breach confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Personal data was accessed by diba? Unauthorized diba? People, individuals. Diba? In HR, when we have an applicant, malamang we share the personal data of the applicant to the hiring department, diba? Hiring manager or supervisor. Pero siguro pagdating sa kanya, how often tell me if this is familiar, na siya mismo, sinishare din niya sa team. Diba? Sa team niya. And often, yung team niya, nasa stock ngayon yung applicant. It happens. Okay? We may smilingly laugh about it, diba? Pero it may also be true, diba? O kaya during sa reception, diba? Nagsulat, nag-iwan ng ID, yung tao. Later na lang malaman mo na yung tao, yung guard siguro or receptionist, inad na pala yung tao in Facebook, diba? Nahanap na pala siya yung social media. So, is that part of our process? So, confidentiality yung tama. Integrity is nagbago yung data, diba? Nawala natin. So that's also availability, diba? Na tipong during the recruitment process, we would be asking from our applicants to resubmit their resumes, their transcript records, their government IDs because we misplaced them. So availability din din natin dyan. Yung right to be, yung data subject rights naman, we violated the rights. Di ba? We did not inform them of our purposes, di ba? Of our security measures, kasama din yan. Di ba? We denied them of their right to correct their information. And we denied them of their right for damages, di ba? Pag meron tayong breach. So, in this context, again, for data privacy risk in HR, dito tayo iikot. Yung tenets ng data privacy as well yung breaches, non-conformity, and violations. Okay? So, with these in mind, you don't have to memorize them. I'm not expecting all of us to be masters of the data privacy principles about compliance in this morning's webinar. Hindi. At the very least, we know, meron palang ganon. We remember na ganon, di ba? Sa Bloom's taxonomy of learning, di ba? Ang unang-una is remember. Di ba? Maalala natin, naalala ko yun, narinig ko yun. In a webinar that I attended, in the law that I read, a video I watched, di ba? So dive into HR operations and the data privacy compliance. Diba? Recruitment. Diba? Yan yung isa sa mga parang, it's a common question we saw during the pre-registration and I think during the mentee meter activity earlier. So ano yung mga questions natin, challenge natin in recruitment with regards to data privacy compliance? So there's talent acquisition, diba? Yung specificity and comprehensiveness ng consent forms natin and sometimes even our privacy notices. And of course, managing applicant resumes, di ba? The applicants that we end up hiring or the applicants that did not necessarily progress in our recruitment process, di ba? So when you say talent acquisition, how do we collect personal information? Resumes, family background, if you do collect those, di ba? Government IDs, either scanned or photocopies or even sometimes yung actual ID kinukuha kasi pang-verify. Kasi may ganung klaseng process in our recruitment. Diba? So ano yung risk natin doon? Do we actually get consent? Diba? Pag nag-submit ba ng resume yung applicant through email natin, natanggap natin, does that imply consent? Diba? So with that, hindi siya necessarily, consent is never implied. Okay, diba? So probably we need to put in safeguard security measures in our websites, diba? Respond to the applicants when we receive resumes through email. Na we'll be processing their application, diba? For yun yung purpose natin. Yeah. On the consent specificity, the DPA, the National Privacy Commission, actually published a toolkit and several advisories and circulars that contains outlines on what a consent form needs to have. Okay, it's relatively comprehensive. Kasi yun yung tanong eh, di ba? Yung specificity and comprehensiveness ng consent. Kasi we need to be able to be transparent. Diba? Babalik natin sa principles kanina. We need to be transparent to our applicants. We're only collecting this much information for these purposes and to yung mga security measures natin. Diba? And moving on to the retention periods. Diba? Kasi malamang if we hire the applicant already, so their personal data falls to our on files already. Pero what happens to those applicants that we do not hire, diba? Did not progress in our recruitment process? So ano yung retention period natin for those? Other companies would just retain the personal information, personal data, documents submitted in 1 week. Yung iba 6 months, yung iba 1 year. Diba? Regardless of the retention period that we actually declare for our own organizations, what we need to actually have is declare the purpose. Why are we retaining it for that long? Diba? Kasi pag wala naman tayong dahilan, we don't have purposes for retaining too much or information for that long, we may actually not need them at all. So it begs the question, baka kailangan natin i-dispose na lang sila. Okay? So I hope with that we get to kahit paano clear a few questions, lingering questions about the recruitment process, about talent acquisition in relation to data privacy compliance. So again, we go back to the tenets of data privacy, principles, yung CIA, and ano. Diba? Pagdating sa recruitment process, sino ba nakaka-access sa personal data ng applicants natin? Diba? Yung hiring manager lang ba? Or ano ba yung mga policies in place natin? Na pwede ba i-share ng hiring manager sa ibang tao? Or, another scenario would be if we have sister companies, we belong to a group of companies, we get an applicant that we do not accept, we share the applicant's personal data to other sister companies. So is that part of our recruitment process? Did we inform the applicant of that process, of that uh, purpose, that their application may be reviewed by other companies, di ba? So kasama siya. So yun yung babalikan natin. We just need to always go back to the principles, yung confidentiality, integrity, availability, and yung data subject rights. So yun lagi yung binabalikan natin when regards to complying to data privacy regulations. So HR operations, again, yung next would be information disclosure. So when I say information disclosure, ito yung pag-share natin ng information outside our organizations, ba? To our external partners, service providers, ganyan. So ano yung mga common questions, challenges when it comes to information disclosure? So nandiyan yung extent of sharing information during background investigations, di ba? A company would call us, HR, and ask about a former employee that's applying for them. Di ba? Or tayo mismo, conducting our own background investigations of our own applicants. Diba? What information are you getting from other companies about the applicants? Diba? Tapos meron dyan, it was asked during the pre-registration, yung disclose information during surveys. Diba? And I believe it's related to background investigation. And of course, yung towards the end, again, yung information disclosure is yung requiring employees to disclose vaccination status, especially now during the pandemic, or even other health conditions. Now, so paano siya? Diba? Ano yung mga risks natin dyan, yung challenges natin dyan? Again, babalikan natin yung principles, yung CIA, at saka yung data subject rights. So, when other companies conduct background investigations of our former employees, diba? What do we share to these background investigation activities with other companies? Ano yung extent ng binibigyan natin sa kanila? Do we share too much information? Diba? If we do share information, regardless of the wealth of information that we share, did we inform our former employees that, when a background investigation is done about you, we'll be sharing this much information, diba? About your time here with the company. Diba? Again, consent, babagsakan natin siya. Or if not, siguro nasa employment contract. Though I have yet to see an employment contract that would specify background information clauses. Parang wala pa. In my experience, in helping companies comply, pagdating sa HR, pagdating sa employment contract, wala necessarily ganun eh. So, where do we put that in our process? Diba? Na informing our, siguro, resigning employee, leaving employee, na, pag nag-background information, ito yung sasabihin namin about you. Tapos, tayo, ganun din. When we conduct background investigations ourselves, diba? Parang, did we inform the applicants? By the way, we'll be conducting background information, background investigation, we'll be asking the character references you provided diba, about you. So, tapos when we conduct those, ano yung information na hinihingi natin? Is it excessive? Too much ba? O sapat lang? Diba? So, yun yung kailangan i-measure. Diba? Saan tayo? Ayaw natin ng sobra, siguro ayaw din natin ng kulang. Doon tayo sa sapat lang. So, ano yung sapat lang? What's proportional? It's based on the declared purpose diba? That you mentioned. So, kaya ipapato ko yung question ulit sa atin. So, what's our purpose? What's our declared purpose? What's our objective? Diba? So, given our objective, ano yung enough information for us as we define it? So that's when we conduct background investigations. Ganun din when disclosing information through surveys. Diba? Siguro pag mayroong loan through a bank, sumawag yung banko sa company, nagtanong about the employee na naglo-loan. So, ano yung information na kailangan ibigay natin? Diba? Ibibigay ba natin yung birthday, yung number, yung address, yung pangalan ng parents, pangalan ng siblings, sweldo nila? Parang, is that part of the purpose in answering these surveys? Diba? So, if you notice na yung nagko-conduct ng background investigation or surveys sa atin is already collecting too much information, then you can challenge them. Bakit ganyan? Parang sobra-sobra yung hinihingi mo. Diba? Ano ba yung purpose? But parang hinihingi mo na lahat. How about conducting lifestyle check? Sige, again, we'll get to answer your questions that you post. Nakikita ko sino nagpa-flash eh. Na may nagpa-post. Sige. Uh, Ganun din siguro when it comes to lifestyle check, since we're here in this slide. We need to only collect based on the purpose that we actually uh, declared. Diba? Uh, I guess for other organizations who do recruitment of members, diba, of employees, uh, minsan may lifestyle check din. Pero ganun din eh, parang ano purpose natin for collecting that information? Or pagdating sa lifestyle check, ano yung kinukuha lang natin ba? Do we need to know how many cars that person has? How many houses the person owns? Diba? Parang kailangan ba natin yun? If we do, then what for? Anong purpose? So then if we have a purpose, we need to declare it. We need to inform them about it. Now yung last part dito, yung requiring employees to disclose vaccination status. I believe there's a Republic Act 11332, diba, na requires individuals to actually disclose, diba, health information regarding a pandemic, diba? Ang purpose naman kasi nun is to manage and control, diba, yung spread ng pandemic na nangyayari ngayon, especially now. So in that case, hindi natin necessarily kailangan ng consent. So our employees needs to inform us, yung safety officer, yung HR, of their health status, diba, health conditions. Pero that does not mean na kahit walang consent tayong hiningi, magiging pabaya tayo. We don't need to implement or put in place security measures to protect that information. Or it also doesn't mean that we get to publish these health information in social media, diba? Diba? According to NPC nga, in the Privacy Awareness Week last week, diba? Collect only what is necessary, diba? And disclose only to proper authorities. Diba? So for HR practitioners, HR departments, managers, yung safety officers, diba? Kayo naman ba dapat tayo nagdi-disclose, diba? Siyempre sa DOH, diba? Yung mga, I guess, hospitals, diba? So based on the yung joint statement ng National Privacy Commission and the Department of Health last year. Diba? So we don't necessarily disclose it to our neighbor. Diba? To siguro if it's part of our policy to disclose it to the entire company, dapat alam ng lahat ng employees na pag nag-submit ka ng vaccination status mo, alam ng buong organization. So policy ba siya? If it's a policy, kailangan nag-consent lahat. Diba? Parang informed lahat. Kasi yung pag-require naman is to inform HR or the safety officer. Pero to inform the entire company, parang bakit? Ano yung purpose natin? Diba? Kasi often, like what happened last year, diba? Pag napopost publicly yung vaccination status ng mga tao, they get ostracized. Diba? Nagkakaroon ng discrimination. Na ayaw natin yun eh. It's not part of the process or the purpose that we have. Especially in HR, diba? Parang, is that necessarily part of our function in HR? Diba? To disclose such information. Charm, pa-note na lang siguro ng mga, hello po, thank you
Yes,
for
sir.
your
Yes, sir.
messages. Yan. And questions. So we'll try to address them later towards hopefully with information disclosure in the domain of HR. We again babalikan natin yung principles nina, yung confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and yung real subject rights. Do we have purposes? Did we declare them? Diba? Did we get consent if ever we do need to consent? Are they written in our policies? Diba? When disclosing information. Clear po? So yung next natin is outsourcing. When we say outsourcing, ito yung we get the services of external partners, diba? External companies, or tayo mismo, we offer our services to other companies. So when it comes to HR, diba? Yung human resource systems, ito yung HRIS, HRMS, manual, electronic, diba? Kasi often, if we're a company that doesn't necessarily have or the resources, you don't have the resources, or we don't necessarily want to spend in building our own HR system. Diba? we get the services of other companies that provide HRIS, HRMS, diba? So, kasama dyan yung external audit, di ba? Government man or private, di ba? Ano ba yung, di ba, when we get their services, especially yung mga private firms that provide external audit, di ba? In relation to employee to-all files, do we share the to-all files with them? Diba? Kasama din dyan minsan yung training and development. Di ba? We send our people, our employees to go undergo training, di ba? So, it begs the question, ano yung information na sinishare natin doon sa mga firms na to? And of course, other outsourced HR function services. So, recruitment, I believe, is one of them. Payroll is also one of them. Yung computation ng BIR, ng mga taxes, yan. Sama yan. So, when it comes to outsourcing, again, ibabalik ko lang uli dun sa binanggitan kanina na tenets ng data privacy, yung principles, yung CIA, tsaka yung rights. So, when it comes to systems, HR systems, HRIS, regardless if it's internally built or we get the services of other firms, it begs the question, who has access to the information, the wealth of information, sensitive and personal, in these HR systems? Manual man o electronic, di ba? Malamang siguro si HR may access dyan. Pero sino pa? Or even in HR, sino sa HR may access? Di ba? We need to strictly implement yung mga security clearance, di ba? User access control management, di ba? Kasi pag hindi, kahit sino lang may access sa HR systems natin. Or for the manual system, when I say manual systems, not necessarily paper lang ha. When I say manual systems, wala tayong application that we're using, we're just using files, di ba? Ang pinaka-application natin, Word, Excel, di ba? Siguro online storage or a file server, network drive, di ba? Now we store all of our HR documents, di ba? Applicants, data, employee data. Sino may access doon? Is it accessible to IT? Di ba? Often, pagdating sa technical resources, for the longest time, IT tends to reign supreme. And nothing against IT practitioners. I'm an IT practitioner before. So, pero kasi yun yung nangyayari. Parang IT always have an admin access to systems, to folders, di ba? Na it begs the question, do they need access to those? Baka pwedeng limited. Or pag meron lang kailangan gawin si IT, saka lang niya nakikita yung information. Di ba? And especially when it comes to HR information, di ba? Sweldo ng tao, sweldo ng executives. Di ba? So, yun, malimit lang naman ng isang HR system. Di ba? Yung 201 file ng isang tao. So, it begs the question, yung mga developers ba natin na internal and even external developers, yung mga admins, do they have access to these information? If they do, so we need to question, bakit? What purpose? To provide support. Okay, do they also always need to access the information to provide support? Diba? So yun yung mga kailangan natin in mind. So ito yung CIA, diba? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. We need to practice the principle of least privilege. Sino lang ba dapat may access sa information? Especially with HR information. Diba? So when it comes to external providers ng systems natin in HR, kamusta ba yung mga service level agreements natin? Yung contracts natin. Diba? So we need to have those in place. Diba? Do we need to have data privacy clauses, provisions in our contracts? Kung wala, probably we need to have data sharing agreements in place or outsourcing agreements in place. Kung provider lang naman sila ng system, so most likely, sila, PIP. They don't have their own purposes for the information that we have shared. So, dun tayo ngayon magkakaroon ng question pag sila mismo may sariling purpose nila sila on the personal data we have placed in their systems. Bakit? Para saan? Aanin nila. Diba? So, when it comes to external audits, diba? Pagkakalam ko according to labor code, pag government inspector yung nag-audit, mandated sila to actually see, access the employee 201 files. If Sir Ray is already here or si Christine, siguro, Charm, you can chime in siguro para ano ba yung masasama natin dyan. Pero kung private firm yan, yung nagbigay ng service on providing external audit. So, it begs the question, kailangan ba nila makita yung 201 files? If they do, kamusta ba yung mga agreements natin with them, yung service level agreements natin with them. And if we have them in place, did we inform our employees that during external audit, these providers will have access to your 201 files? Diba? So yan yung mga questions. Dapat ba meron sila? Kung meron, hindi lagay natin. It's documented. Okay. When providing training and development, ganun din. Diba? We send out our employees to these trainings, diba? Local man, overseas, online, physical. Diba? So what information do we share to these firms? Diba? Are we sharing too much information? Email lang ba? Pangalan lang ba? Contact information? Siguro position, normally kasama yon. Diba? So ano yung mga agreements natin, service level agreements natin with them? Diba? So yan yung mga, again, binabalikan natin yung CIA. Diba? Ano yung security measures? Meron sila. Diba? Meron yung providers ng systems, yung external audit, yung nag-provide ng training. What are their security measures? Kasi pag wala, binigay natin yung personal data ng HR personal data natin to them, tapos nagkaroon sila ng breach, accountable din tayo as the company who shared the information. Diba? We're still also accountable for that. Kasi we did not necessarily inspect or ensure that our external partners are also complying with data protection regulations. Tapos tayo naman, as providers of these services, yun din, what are our security measures to protect the personal data entrusted to us? Again, ulit natin the personal data that you're processing, we're not the owners. We don't own the data. We are just merely the processors or the controllers. Diba? The data is entrusted to us. Kaya when a breach happens, tayo yung napupuntahan, tayo yung namumultahan, or minsan nakukulong, or tayo yung na-fine or na-cease and desist. Kasi we are the ones processing it on behalf of controllers, of the data subjects, diba? So yun siya. Doon tayo iikot. So I do hope when it comes to outsourcing, di ba, medyo na-clarify natin siya. Again, I believe that you have other questions. We'll have a separate slide na lang on the Q&A so we can discuss further. Okay. Ayoko naman ako lagi nagsasalita para at least this can be an active discussion between the participants and yung organizers of this webinar. Pero para lang masagot natin most of the questions, ito siya. We're going through this. Now, yung mga other questions or other challenges, threats ni HR, ito siya. So, it's a question and we received during the pre-registration. How is data privacy essential to HR? Okay. So, with everything that we've discussed during the recap and during the previous slides before this one, siguro I would like to throw the question to you, to our participants. Tingin nyo, how essential is data privacy to HR? Diba? Gaano ba ka-important to protect personal data? Kasi yun naman sinasabi data privacy. We need to protect personal data that's being in the custody of HR. So it's fairly important. Diba? For those who are nodding, thank you. I'm not necessarily seeing you now. Pero for those who are nodding now, oo nga, it's fairly important, diba? From what we've discussed already. For those who are still in the dark or still confused, we're saying that data privacy, data protection security measures are essential for HR because of the wealth of personal data and sensitive personal data that we are processing in our departments. Diba? Ano ba laman yan? Work background, education background, birthdays, religion, kasama yan trainings, health information. Diba? These are sensitive information. Diba? Contact information, addresses, sometimes information about the family, parents, brothers, wives, mga anak. Diba? Kasama siya So with all of these information in the custody of HR, we really need to protect them. Diba? Regardless if we were the ones who collected it or we collected it from the data subjects or collected from other companies, other organizations. So data privacy is very essential in HR. So how does data privacy affect us as part of human resources? Since we know, nandun na tayo, it's no longer a question if it's essential. We know that data privacy is essential in HR. How does it affect us? It affects us by we now need to implement security measures. We now need to review our processes, di ba? We need to check, kamusta ba yung mga process natin? Do we have security measures in place? Sino ba nakaka-access ng information? We now need to start questioning our processes. Di ba? Kasi paano pag may nagreklamo na applicant? Bakit napunta sa isang company yung information ko, isa yun lang naman ako nag-submit. So yun yung impact sa atin. Diba? Now we need to explain. Diba? So, kasi these are common activities that's performed now, diba? Even though mayroong mga data protection regulations, nagagawa pa rin siya, diba? So we now need to review. That's the impact to us, diba? Review our processes. Kasi ayaw natin na we get caught flat-footed by the DPA, the National Privacy Commission, or any other firm out there that's out to look for breaches, diba? We don't want to get caught flat-footed. Now, we did not necessarily implement security measures, or there's a breach that we did not know about, diba? Or there's a breach that you know about, but we did not inform the commission, the National Privacy Commission, or the data subjects. Worse, we did not do anything about it, diba? Hinayaan lang natin, diba? We just swept it under the rug, so to speak, diba? If you may. Kasi often, pag may breach, naka-encounter ng ransomware yung isang tao, yung isang HR natin, ang ginagawa lang nila, tinatago lang. Hindi lang nire-report sa IT. There was one company that I encountered, yung payroll officer nila, ganun nangyari. Nag-open siya ng isang file from an email na hindi niya kilala, na ransomware yung kanyang laptop. So as a payroll officer, just imagine the wealth of information about the company that's in that laptop. Diba? So, tinanong niya yung IT, babayaran ba natin to? Sabi nung COO, bakit natin babayaran yan? Hindi natin babayaran yan. Kasi mahal eh. Diba? Mahal norm pag may ransomware, mahal yung hinihingi just to be able to access again the information. Diba? And who's to say that the hackers were already able to exfiltrate, diba? Collect or get the information already stored in that machine. So, it really requires from us as HR practitioners vigilance, diba? And due diligence in protecting personal data, in processing personal data. So, isa sa mga tanong during the pre-registration is yung benefits of data sharing agreement. So, what are the benefits, diba? Kasi pag wala tayong data sharing agreement, if we don't necessarily place service level agreements or contracts that we can share personal data to external partners, then we may not be allowed to do so. Kasi kung hindi documented yung ating sharing of personal data to external partners or even our collection of personal data from other organizations, then we're not necessarily allowed to do that. Kailangan kasi documented. So, means to document that is, of course, updating our service level agreements, contracts with our external partners, or if you're not necessarily able to update them, we now need to draft our data sharing agreements or outsourcing agreements. So that's the benefit of that. Kasi without these provisions or documentations that allows us to share data, then we're not necessarily allowed to do so. Kasi if we do so, we do share data without it being documented, that would come out as a breach, diba? As a malicious or unauthorized disclosure of personal data. As we mentioned earlier, diba, there's a penalties. So, ito isang question din. Yung DPO career path. Now, nagulat din ako eh. So, from an HR perspective, ito yung tanong DPO career path. I would answer this, siguro, nabanggit natin, di ba? That the DPO ensures that the company, the organization, is continuously complying to data protection regulations. So, siguro I would pass the question to our participants again. So, ano tingin nyo? Anong kailangan na merong skills, competencies, si DPO para ma-ensure niya na the company is continuously complying to data protection regulations. Siguro dapat meron siyang training, di ba? Certifications, even. Si National Privacy Commission actually provides yung training nila for DPOs and regularly conducts awareness sessions. Kailangan updated si DPO dun sa mga trends ngayon, bagong threats, di ba? So that can be a career path. Siguro The next question, again, I will throw again the question to you, to our HR practitioners. Ano ba yung competency development plan natin for the compliance team or for the DPO, di ba? Again, we need to uh, equip our appointed DPOs. Okay? Now, when it comes to DPOs and appointing DPOs or even hiring DPOs, we want a DPO na has the capability to make decisions. Di ba? Uh, there was one company that I met na yung DPO nila is a personnel under IT. So may IT manager, may IT team lead. And the IT team lead is in the finance or accounting na department which reports to the president. So just imagine, nasan siya sa structure ng kanilang organization. So medyo mababa siya. So often, when it comes to data privacy compliance, kasi kailangan niya mag-make ng recommendations, ano yung assurance na maririnig yung, that the DPO will be able to voice out his or her opinion or his or her recommendations to compliance, di ba? To comply with data protection regulations. Kaya often ang DPO dapat yung medyo mataas-taas, di ba? Kung di C-level executive man, a manager, di ba? Someone that can actually make decisions, recommend to top management, has the ear of the top management president. Ito yung kailangan gawin. Kasi if our DPO would be just a processor, di ba? In a department, in a group belonging to a department, parang ano yung pwede niyang masabi, di ba? To champion, to steer the compliance program of the company. So when hiring DPOs, hello HR practitioners, hello recruitment officers. Kasi when you try to search for DPO vacancies, openings in all of these recruitment sites, paiba-iba eh. Medyo may disparity eh. Pero again, ang siguro magandang to have in mind is the DPO champions the compliance program of the company. Diba? The DPO ensures that the company is continuously complying. So having that in mind, ano tingin natin na dapat nakasulat sa ating job post regarding a DPO position? Diba? So yun yung gusto natin imabalik dyan. Ayun. And lastly, in this slide at least, yung HR do's and don'ts. Okay. I would focus muna doon sa don'ts. Sige, diba? When you say don'ts, diba? Siguro, balikan natin yung principles, yung CIA, at yung rights data subject. Pagdating sa don't, we don't necessarily need to disclose personal data of our applicants, of our employees, former employees, consultants, service providers, to people in our company that does not necessarily have any purpose for using that information. Diba? So, ano natin? We need to keep that in check. We need to review our process. Diba? Kasi pag hindi, baka maging pabaya tayo sa ating pag-process ng personal data. Another don't would be, again, nothing against companies who have done it, but it's a general don't. Let's not necessarily copy privacy notices from other companies of similar industry or sector. Kasi I noticed that it's still a common practice. Kasi when we copy privacy notices from other companies of similar sectors, industries, we're not necessarily being transparent of our own process, of the data points or the information we're collecting, diba? Or the purposes of our process and our security measures that we implemented. Diba? Let's not put in motherhood statements that we will be implementing, diba? Reasonable technical security measures. Medyo ano siya eh. It's too high level. Okay? Pag nabasa natin yung guidelines ng privacy guidelines on the privacy notice by the NPC and the DPA, sa toolkit ng NDPA, makita natin doon, it needs to be more specific than that. So ito yung mga general don'ts that we practitioners might need to veer away from. Diba? Huwag natin gawin yan. It's common mistakes. Diba? These are good examples of common misconceptions, mistakes. Diba? So pagdating sa do's, ano yung kailangan gawin? Okay. To answer that, Actually, before I answer that, we move on muna sa Q&A natin. Kasi yung do's, doon siya sa third agenda natin, yung takeaway points natin. So hopefully through that set of slides, we get to answer your question na, ano nga ba natin gagawin natin ngayon? So what does HR need to do? Diba? Need to perform. So with that, so let's pause for a Q&A session before we actually continue with our presentation. So ano yung mga questions natin earlier? Charm?
Okay. Good morning. So our questions earlier that are found in the chat box are the following. Let's start with the first question raised earlier from Miss Silva. Where can we classify the home address? Is it the sensitive personal information? This is about the categories of personal information that was, or personal data that was spoken about a while ago.
Charm, do you want to answer?
Um, This is classified as personal information only under the Data Privacy Act. Because as mentioned, sensitive personal information covers education, medical
Medical,
information,
work, diba? Government
so anything
IDs.
that is not under the categories given by the Data Privacy Act is classified as personal information.
So yun. So Ms. Silva, hopefully we get to answer your question regarding the address. So contact information generally is personal data, personal information. It's not necessarily sensitive. Sensitive kasi is specific, like what Charm mentioned earlier, and we presented earlier in the previous slides. So work, education, diba? Health, government IDs, age, religion. So these are sensitive personal information. It's specifically mentioned in the DPA. Kung ano yung sensitive personal information. Okay. Charm? Ano
Okay,
yung
the second
iba?
is from Ms. Laka. Do we need guidelines for loan verification? What if the employee is not applying for loans? I'm actually a bit confused with this question.
Oo nga.
Is it about someone else asking for a loan verification, or if this same employee is asking a loan verification, but the second question implies that the employee is not applying for loans?
Siguro to answer dito sa let's assume that the employee is applying for a loan. So pag siguro nag-conduct ng survey or background investigation yung I guess yung bank, di ba? Na kung saan nag-loan yung employee. So it begs the question, ano ba yung kailangan ng bank or financial institution with respect to background information about the person that's applying for a loan, di ba? So ano ba yung kailangan ma-disclose on that? Pag sinabi ng bank, ito kailangan ko, we can question, we can challenge. So, bakit yan yung kailangan mo? Ano ba yung purpose for that? Or even, di ba, pag may tumawag, we can actually even get the consent of the employee. Na, uy, may tumawag, ito yung hinihingi. Ito yung kailangan daw nila. Diba?
To ensure also that the employee really is applying for a loan. Baka kasi scam lang yan.
Yun. Siguro, I guess, doon papasok yung second question ni Miss Laka. Tama ba, Charm?
Yes, sir.
Na baka may scam, may tumawag lang na kung kunyari nag-loan tong employee, yung pala hindi talaga nag-loan, di ba? May phrase trust but verify. Na tipong, yes, we get these calls, we get these questions, pero we need to check, talaga ba nangyari? Talaga bang may nagtanong, talaga may nag-loan, di ba? Probably we can have a policy or inform our employees na pag mag-loan kayo, sabihin nyo kami kasi malamang may tawag na for a background investigation. We can have that siguro. Diba? So I do hope we were able to answer that.
Yes.
Charm?
Okay. The next one is from Keppel Philippines. During the background checking, is it safe to inform first the data subject and ask his full consent bago ibigay ang mga needed data? I think this is regarding application, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, siguro. So, ito is siguro for former employees natin that other companies will do background checks on them. Siguro, I'm guessing. Diba? Or tayo mismo, when we are conducting background investigation about our own applicants, diba? We ask their former companies. Diba? So, yes, initially, kunyari for an applicant, we do need to get consent. Diba? We need to get their permission. We will be contacting your previous employers, your character references, diba? Kasi pag hindi, parang we may be violating, diba? Kasi we did not inform them. We may be violating their right. We're not transparent that we're doing that. So we need to specify that in our recruitment process. Now, for our former employees, siguro before they leave, di ba? Sabihin natin, we can inform them na, pag may tumawag, di ba? We'll be disclosing some of your information for background investigation. Pero ganun din, dapat yung company that conducts the background information, background investigation, needs to inform their applicants. Same with us. So before we actually start disclosing, diba? Plus, we need to verify na yung tumatawag ba, talagang ina-applyan ng tao. Diba? Kasi again, baka, lalo na ngayon, especially now, diba? There's a phrase na naging creative ang magdanakaw. Especially now, we need to be careful to whom and what information are we disclosing. I do hope that was answered or clarified. Charm?
Sir, siguro to add na lang din do sa sa education. Medyo connected din naman tong education and the loan verification. I have to remember that in the background checking, this is part of in a way educational background, and educational background is a sensitive
Sensitive.
information. That's why
Yeah.
we also have to be extra careful with this process or with this situation. All right, next na po.
Sige.
Okay, for Miss Jing, it's a direct query. For contact purposes, can we ask the staff if they had contact with a COVID positive staff?
Part siya ng contact tracing. Pagkakalam ko, yes. Kumaga, again, through RA 1133, 11332, yung nag-positive kailangan mag-declare. Diba? At least in the organization, do sa HR or sa safety officer. Hindi naman kailangan i-post sa buong kumpanya, nag-positive ako for COVID. Or even the HR or the safety officer does not necessarily need to publicize that or publish that. Unless, of course, it's a policy na dapat yata hindi naman kasi confidential siya. So, yes, to perform contact tracing, yun. Kumbaga, we can't necessarily invoke, data privacy yan. Ayoko sabihin kung nag-positive ako or merong nakasalamuha for contact tracing. Kasi if you remember, that was one of the challenges back in January and Feb of last year, contact tracing, di ba? Where organizations refuse to disclose yung close contact ng isang nag-positive when contact tracing was being conducted. Hindi siya, pagdating kasi sa Data Privacy Act, pag meron ng investigation, diba, national security, health ang involved, we are required to actually disclose it to the proper authorities lang, syempre. We don't necessarily need to get consent from the data subject or from our employees. So pag gano'n natin siya, sabihin natin, of course, yung purpose natin, we're doing contact tracing. Diba? Syempre, we really need to be performing contact tracing for us to be able to do that. Ayaw naman natin sabihin na nagiging scapegoat lang natin si contact tracing for us to be able to know kung sino yung nakasama niya for the past 2 weeks. Diba? So, yun siya. So, we need to declare the purpose for getting that information. So, we hope that is answered. The question is answered.
And siguro, sir, to add, ang question po kasi niya, if I'm going to read it word per word, can we ask the staff if they had contact with the COVID positive staff? I think if you're going to look at the DOH side, usually it is the COVID positive staff who's being asked sino yung mga contact nyo. Kasi di ba contact tracing is asking the COVID positive staff. And eventually, with that question, lalabas supposedly yung name ng staff na kasama niya.
Kung sino yung nakasama niya, yes. Siguro yun. That's a better perspective na dapat yung nag-positive, na alam natin nag-positive, kaya natin ma-interview. Diba? Charlie, a random staff, meron ko ba nakasama na positive? Parang medyo, how would you know kung nag-positive siya? Diba?
Ano nga sikreto nga, so to speak.
May confidential nga. Okay.
Oo. Okay. So next question from Miss Arana. Can we share information can we share information to our sister company, especially if we want to refer an applicant?
Yun. Thank you for the question, ma'am.
Good question.
Kasi we encounter a company, we consulted for a company, a group of companies, na yung ginagawa nila. It turns out they actually share the applicant data. Now, sa tanong na can, pero, pwede naman, pero, we need to inform the applicant that their application, diba, resume, submitted documents, may be shared with other companies that would be inquiring, di ba? Sister companies. Uh, Kailangan lang pumayag siya. Consent pa rin ang babalikan natin dyan. Diba? If it's part of our recruitment process, we need to inform them. Diba? Na, we have this process that we'll be sharing your application. Kung gusto mo pa, pumayag ka, okay lang. Di, sige, we'll endorse your application to other companies. Kung hindi sila pumayag, edi the buck stops there. Diba? We won't necessarily disclose the information at all. So, ma'am, I do hope that quick answer was able to clarify your
Or to
question.
add, maybe the applicant could also have the option. What if I'm the applicant and I only want to submit my application to you and I'm not interested in the other companies? So at
Yun.
least I have that option to say, I am sorry, I only want you or I only want your company,
Oo.
so to speak.
Kasi may ganun may ganun. Especially kunyari kung specific sa sector na ito lang ina-applyan niya, yung sister company ibang sector na, ayaw niya. We need to inform them.
Sir
Again, consent.
Ernest,
Yes
there's
po,
a
ma'am.
question from Facebook
Yes.
from Ederly Espejo. Is it okay to disclose admin cases of staff during background investigation?
Yun, siguro. Admin cases of staff during background investigation. Uh, Background investigation. Kumbaga, another company is
Um,
investigating is doing background check on the employee. Ah, baka kailangan declared yun dapat sa employee may na may case, na may legal case. Kasi baka confidential siya eh. Baka dapat hindi eh. Diba? Kasi it's a legal case. Eh. So, uh, at mo siguro sabihin, hindi ko nga sure kung paano mo sabihin eh. No? Pero dapat inform pa rin yung tao eh na, okay, pag may legal case, sasabihan namin yung nagba-background investigation sa'yo. Diba? Pero, do you know anyone that would agree to that? Pag nag-humingi ka ng consent for that, malamang hindi eh. Diba? So, ayun,
okay.
Miss Christine, I do hope that one.
Thank you, sir. Is there any questions that you
Charm,
can can put in our chat box?
si Miss
Additional
Laika
question from
yata.
Okay.
Miss Israel, if you're ready to go to another question. If DPA policies are not yet rolled out to employees and their consent are not yet obtained, how do HR temporarily respond to government offices conducting surveys? For example, PSA.
PSA. Okay, sige. Yung PSA kasi it's a government agency, di ba? Philippine Statistics Authority, if I'm not mistaken. Baka unless iba yung PSA na sabihin ni
Kunyari,
Miss
alam ko,
Israel.
sir.
Oo. Pero kung hindi siya government, tapos private company lang that's conducting a survey, our initial response, kung wala pa tayong DPA policy set, we need to set them now. We need to comply already. We need to perform the compliance requirements already. So habang wala pa, then might as well don't disclose information. Unless, of course, government, which is mandated by the law for them to collect the information. Pero kung private company lang siya, diba, external partner that collects information, baka dapat hindi muna until we have security measures in place. So, yun ma'am. I do hope
Kumbaga, sir, check if there's a law in place. Parang yun yung pinaka-main, niya. May batas pa.
for government, for government
Opo, for
agencies
government
collecting
agencies.
information. Diba? Pero kung, again, it's a private company na acting on their own volition, diba? On their own purpose, baka dapat hindi muna until we actually implement the compliance requirements of the DPA. Which, yun naman yung next topic natin. Ano ba yung mga do's na kailangan natin gawin based on the DPA. Thank you, ma'am, for your question. Charm?
Hindi lang, may mga pumapasok pang iba.
Sige lang.
Baka feeling ko may na-miss ako eh.
Yung kasunod doon si Miss Laka yata.
Ito, may mahaba from Sir Hernaez. Hi sir, in applying DPA in HR systems, is it okay or possible that it can have excessive but justified data collection as long it is well stated what the purpose, retention, and how will it be processed and disposed? Because in the digital era, Data plays a big role in HR systems, especially in analytics and demographics, and still compliant to DPA. Adding the system security features, user access, and privilege levels. Because there are a lot of HR softwares now.
Yeah. Quick answer dun sa ano. When you say excessive, nabanggit mo naman na justified. Siguro sir, kailangan ganun pa rin eh. I-review mo pa rin yung information na kinokollect. Minsan it's too excessive na kahit maglagay ka ng purpose, hindi pa rin siya aligned. Diba? So, kunyari, example na lang, diba? Before, siguro, when I say before, 2 decades ago before, na when answering application forms from companies, hinihingi yung pangalan ng parents, pangalan ng mga siblings, birthdays nila, even yung salary ranges nila. Diba? So, it begs the question, why? Especially now. Diba? Looking back, bakit nga ba kailangan yun? Aanin mo siya. Diba? Bakit mo kailangan makuha yung educational attainment ng mga siblings, ng parents? Siguro, I guess, for our HR practitioner participants here, you can think of reasons, diba? Purposes for that. Sige, okay lang, walang problema. As long as declared siya na why are you getting all of these information? And and related to the processing that you're doing. Okay? Kasi once you conduct yung risk assessment on data privacy, and always bearing in mind yung tenets ng data privacy kanina, principles, CIA, saka yung rights ng data subject, you might need to reconsider yung pagiging excessive na collection ng personal data. Baka dapat hindi talaga sobra-sobra. Kung ano lang talaga yung kailangan. And maybe you can collect the other information in other phases of the recruitment or the employees or the
Towards
employee stage.
employment na.
Towards employment. So yun siya. Kasi pag nilagay mong excessive agad at the onset, kasi you do have justification purposes for it, malamang kailangan pa rin siya i-review eh. Na bakit mo kailangan all of these? Case in point, there are some companies na in the application form, ang hinihingi nila eye color, hair color, complexion, shirt size, shoe size, ganyan. So, we asked them, bakit yung kailangan to? Ang dami naman, parang napaka-sensitive, napaka-specific to the person. Yung pala, kaya nila kailangan yung body size, yung shoe size, ganyan. Kasi binibigyan nila ng uniform. Walang problema. Pero ba't kailangan ng eye color, hair color? Para saan? Ani mo siya. Diba? Parang that's too much. Parang would you be providing amenities? Or are there processing involved? Pag blue yung mata, pag green, pag brown, pag violet yung hair, diba? So parang, diba, again, it boils down to na, so pag nilagay mo kasi excessive, kailangan ma-review eh. Bakit siya excessive? Ano yung kinukollect mo information? Baka kailangan ito lang. Baka magagawa pa rin natin yung processing natin pag ito lang yung kinukuha. Kunyari, of the 10, tutuloy pa rin naman yung processing pag 5 lang yung nakuha, edi yung 5 lang yung required. The other 5 are either optional or not collected at all. Yes, sir. I do hope I was able to answer that. Again, babalikan natin yung ano lang ba yung kailangan natin na information to process the person, for us to conduct, diba, the processing that we need to. Thank you po. Charm?
Saka sir, to add siguro sa sinabi ni Sir Hernandez, it also makes you think when you said, is it possible that I can have excessive but justified? So if it's justified, how can you say it's excessive? So doon pa lang, medyo gray area na if those items are really excessive or justified. So parang kaya sinabi ni Sir na reviewin kasi the fact that you think that it may be excessive, baka nga excessive siya.
Baka hindi na siya justified yan.
Opo.
Yeah.
Ayun.
Thank
Alright.
you. Thank you po. Thank you, Sir Mr. Hernandez.
Yes.
Okay.
Next from Mr. Navarro. Regarding po sa resume or applications ng applicant, is it required po ba na may signature dapat ang applicant sa resume nila before we process their applications? Or okay lang po na wala?
So with that, I believe I would throw the question to our HR practitioners, to the participants themselves. Do you really need na may signature yung mga resumes? I guess to validate Tama ba? Yung
Or what is the
authenticity,
purpose of the
yung
signature?
authenticity ng resume, kaya pinipirmahan. Para sabihin na, oy, since pinirma mo yan, you're, uh, parang, it's a statement na totoo yung nakasulat dyan. Siguro, that can be. Pero if that's the case, we just need to be clear with the purpose. Na if you're going to require na sign dapat yung resume, edi sabihin natin kung bakit kailangan sign. Kasi, uh, other companies yata, hindi naman necessarily kailangan sign yung resume. Unless, of course, it's a general practice in HR na, na kailangan sign yung resume. So, yun siya. So, pero if your organization will be requiring na kailangan sign yung resume, kailangan lang inform yung tao about it. Kasi, according to the e-commerce app, signature somehow becomes personal information. Kasi it relates to the individual already. So may ganun kasing provision sa e-commerce app. So I hope we get to answer that. Charm?
Okay.
Merong how do we inform NPC?
Sandali lang.
Sige.
Pero sinulat dito si Sir Sid na going back to
Wait,
admin case.
Charm.
Sorry,
Wait.
What?
Meron dito tanong yung how do we inform NPC if we change our DPO? Is there an application form to fill up or just a letter of information to NPC? Now, when changing the DPO, kunyari meron tayong registered before na bago na yung DPO natin, either napalitan, nag-resign yung DPO, we need to, before, we need to resubmit the forms, the documentary requirements that we submitted when we registered our first DPO. And probably a justification bakit nagpalit. Kasi dun sa application form, we're registering the company, the head of the company, and the DPO. So malamang we need to accomplish that form again and provide a reason for changing the DPO. So yun parang basically yung kailangan natin gawin when changing the DPO. So Chan, you mentioned yung kay
Yung kay Sir Sid, siguro going back to the admin case disclosure during background investigation kanina, we mentioned na it may be a sensitive, maybe something to look at dahil nga background investigation siya, may case and everything. He added, is it okay to just say that he had an admin case or terminated without disclosing specifics of the case?
ganun kailangan natin I don't know if there's a law about it, parang wala naman yata. Pero pag ganun, we need to get the consent. We need to inform. At i-inform, di ba? That you need to inform our employee or former employee na, oops, we may disclose na meron kang case either ongoing or natapos na when a background investigation, a background check is done about you. At least inform pa rin sila. Hindi natin pwede gawin yun without informing them. Yun yung basic dun . Kasi again, right to be informed, being transparent, diba? Doon sa tenets and data privacy natin kanina. So, it's still informing our data subject. So, data subject pa rin natin siya . Kahit former employee na siya, former consultant, former service provider, as long as we still have their personal data, they're still our data subjects. Yeah. So, I hope that's clear.
Okay, next, from Miss Laka.
Wait, Sam, okay. Nagsiskip ka. Merong question yata before that.
This is not yung question, yung chat ni Sir Barana. This is regarding dun sa law, sa PSA na he answered our query na meron bang batas? Meron daw. Thank you for that, sir.
Kasi PSA is a government agency, so they're mandated. Thank you.
Thank you. Ayan, from Ms. Laka, need ba ng consent ni existing employee if mag-conduct ng lifestyle check? Is it okay to conduct lifestyle check on a regular basis for the purposes of fit and propriety, or if the employee is only reported to be suspicious or if there is an investigation? Okay.
If you're going to do it regularly for all of your employees or either all of your applicants, you need to have it in place. You need to have it documented. Excuse me. Probably part of your policy, company policy, diba? Inform your employees that you'll be doing that para aware sila. Kasi if we do that without their knowledge, diba? Isipin nyo na lang kung sa ating ginawa yan, without our knowledge, what do? Diba? Will we complain? Is it okay for us? Diba? Kasi gano'n siya eh. Again, being transparent, diba? To our data subjects, diba? The right to be informed, the data subject natin. So we need to inform them. If it's going to be a policy, if we're going to do it regularly, parang quarterly ba, annually, about all of our employees. So yun siya, kailangan siya. Pwede din naman na for suspicious lang, di ba? Na pag merong investigation, we'll do this. Pwede din. Para hindi naman for all employees you're doing that. Kasi baka excessive na rin siya. Parang why would you need to do lifestyle check for all of your employees yearly? Di ba? Kung wala naman silang ginagawa mali. Di ba? So, siguro pag may investigation, you can add that clause na a lifestyle check can be performed. Di ba?
Tsaka sir, what do you mean lifestyle check? Ano yung titignan? Parang gano'n.
Ano ba yung information that you'll be collecting? You'll be gathering? From whom you will be asking these information?
What is the purpose?
Mag-search ka lang ba sa Google, sa Facebook, social media? Pabanggitin ko sana Friendster, pero wag na lang. Baka marami sa atin hindi na alam what that is. So, yun. So, how do you plan to do your lifestyle check? So,
Okay.
inform our employees.
All right. From Kebel Philippines again. Another question po, one government institution requires us to submit data of our trained employees. Is it okay po ba to have a DSA before we disclose or divulge the needed information, or enough na po ba ang NDA? If yes, do we need to inform and ask the full consent of our employees din po ba?
Wait.
Ulit natin yung question. Medyo marami siyang tanong. One government
Pero
institution.
I get the
sige.
question. I get the question. Sige. Hinihingi siya ng government agency, di ba? From your company, of your employees. Siguro, it depends now kung mandate ba ni employee ng government agency na yun to get this type of information. If it's a mandate of that government agency, you don't need to have a DSA. But you do need to inform your employees na, uy, itong si agency na to, kukolektahin to. Pero, do we need to have a DSA with that government agency? Kung mandate niya, no, we don't need. To share, hindi ko alam kung meron sa ating belonging to that sector. For the maritime manning sector, si Marina, I believe,
yes.
collects information about seafarers from the manning companies, the sea-based manning companies. Kailangan ba ngayon ng sea-based manning companies to have a DSA, no sourcing agreement, or any type of agreement with Marina? No. Kasi Marina is mandated to do that, to collect information about, specific information about seafarers. Yun, para may context. I believe for Keppel Philippines, if kailangan malaman sino ba yung government agency that's collecting information of your employees, tapos understand, mandate ba nila? Kasi kung mandate nila, di talagang kailangan nila kunin. Parang ano lang yan, SSS, BIR, DOLE, DTI. Diba? It's their mandate to collect information about the company, even personal data about its employees. So I do hope we were able to answer. Do we need to inform or ask full consent? You don't necessarily need to get full consent, but inform na lang. Kasi pag consent, paano pag hindi sila pumayag? I-required nga tayo by law to submit to them, to the government agency. So tayo rin maiipit. So inform.
Tayo rin yung natali.
Hindi.
Ay naku, hindi
tayo
paano
yung
yan?
naipit. So hindi necessarily siya consent kasi required by law. Parang yung sa health condition, di ba? On a pandemic. Di ba? Hindi na kailangan consent kasi required by law, kailangan i-submit. Pero siyempre, yung manner of submission, yung pag-collect ng information, yung storage ng information, kailangan pa rin may security measures. We hopefully get to answer that. Charm?
Okay, ready for the next question?
Sige.
Okay. From Miss Jor, our regional HR just recently launched a new HRIS, employee information from the from HRIS. Employee information from the three entities are visible to all HR personnel, but each entity has their own appointed HR. Are we violating any rules on DPA?
Kumbaga, tama ba na shared yung HRIS amongst different organizations? Tama, no? Yun yung pagkakaintindi namin dito eh. And if that's the case,
Original.
the HR departments, HR personnel of the three organizations can actually see the employees of all three organizations. Yes, chances are we may be violating kasi it begs the question, aanin ni HR personnel from company 1 yung personnel or employee data ng company 2 and company 3. Di ba? So, pag ganyan, you need to review your security measures, yung inyong user access controls, di ba? Security clearances for that HRIS system. Kasi mukhang exposed eh. Di ba? Exposed yung employee base nung company 1 sa company 2 and 3. Same with company 2 for the others. Unless
Saka
of course you have a policy for that, di ba? And all employees of the three companies are informed na yung data mo makikita ni company 2, makikita ni company 3.
And reason behind, sir, kasi maari lang na kaya sinabi na merong access yung kabila in case na absent or so to speak.
Kumbaga may
Sulat
purpose naman. Kung may purpose, ilagay pa rin. It's a policy of the three companies. Pero kung wala, chances are hindi. Dapat siya kita.
Alright. Another question. If government agency asks for the information about employee due to any type of loan, do we need to ask employee consent before rely to be given? Parang similar kanina, no?
Sorry,
The
so government
government
agency,
agency.
most of the job
If
vacancy,
government
how
if
best to proceed?
government agency asks for the information about employee due to any type of loan, do we need to ask employee consent before the information, I guess, will be given?
Sorry, Charm, ano yung paulit yung question? Medyo nawala yung questions. Malayo na.
Sige, sandali. Um, if government agency asks for the information about the employee due to any type of loan, do we need to ask employee consent before
Sige.
relying information will be given?
Before relaying, di ba? Or
Relaying.
submitting. Ang ano dyan would be, sino yung government agency na yun, mandate ba niya kumuha ng ganong information? Babalikan natin yun. Kumbaga, if it was DTI asking for that information, bakit? Bakit hihingin siya ni DTI? Pero if it were other government agencies that mandate naman talaga nila to get that information, then okay lang. Diba? So, yun yung ano natin. Yun yung, again, babalikan natin yung tenets ng data privacy, principles, CIA, and rights on data subject. Diba? Ano ba yung purpose? Are we transparent to our data subjects? Yun lagi yung babalikan natin. Charm, meron tanong dito may pinost si Miss Christine na question.
Yes, oo.
Yung sa job vacancy.
Sige, ito ba yung sa Facebook?
Oo.
Okay. If a government agency posted a job vacancy, how best to proceed with validating trainings, employment records, or background information without violating one's right to privacy, with due consideration to the data privacy being implemented by that company or training institution? Who should request for the consent? Will the applicant should be the one to send consent to all companies, training institution listed in her what's PDS, sorry?
Okay. Hindi ko rin sure kung ano yung PDS. Miss Christine, ano yung PDS? Sorry. Pero sige, siguro to answer, a quick answer would be, kasi when validating the trainings, diba? Kailangan sinabi natin kay applicant na, or we will be validating the employment records you made, yung trainings, ano. So, papayag ka ba? Kung pumayag ka, we'll go through our own process of investigating.
Sir Ernest, that's
Yes,
personal data sheet.
Personal data sheet. So in this case, si applicant is applying for a job vacancy in a government agency. Tama ba? Yun ba yung question? Miss Christine?
Apo, yun po.
Okay.
If government
So,
agency posted the job vacancy.
So malamang si government agency will be asking for consent from the applicant na, oh, we'll be reviewing or validating the trainings that you submitted, na meron ka na, di ba, yung employment records mo, yung nasa personal data sheet mo, di ba? We'll conduct background investigation. Same with any HR recruitment process, di ba? Kailangan natin kunin yung consent for the applicant.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you po.
Sige. Next question from Mr. Seed. Further clarification, please. We need to inform only, or do we need to get consent from data subject? No one will not give consent for sure.
Ano tong
Dali, titignan ko kung ano yung topic ni Sir
uh,
Sid.
kanina?
I think this is about the admin disclosure of background investigation. Pag merong admin case,
Uh,
Mr. Sid is talking about the admin
yung admin
case
case.
on,
Yung admin case.
yes. Oo.
Siguro, kailangan malinaw dun sa employee, former employee, na bakit natin i-disclose. Kung inform, siguro yun niya. Pero ultimately, kung walang policy, di ba, compliance to all law, contractual obligation, na allowing us, the company, to disclose information or at least information about cases of that employee, kailangan consent pa rin eh. Kasi doon tayo babagsak eh. Compliance to law, di ba? Contractual obligation, or consent. So, in this case, for us to be able to disclose na nagkaroon siya ng case, either batas yan na kailangan siya i-disclose, it's a policy ng kumpanya na pinirmahan ng employee, di ba? In an employment contract siguro, or during the time na umpalis na siya, or consent. Yes, sir. Tama naman eh. No one will give consent for sure. Yes, we agree. Pero unless there's a law about it, the employee needs to be informed and not siguro again, it's a contractual obligation na pumapayag yung employee or consent siya.
Dali.
Siguro kailangan natin reviewin kung may batas nga ba na nagsasabi na pag may kaso yung isang tao, kailangan i-disclose yung kaso niya when a background investigation is performed on that person. We do hope that you were able to answer.
Okay. Next question from Facebook from Ms. Espejo. During the interview, what are the limitations to be asked sa applicants that will not go against their DPA?
So, again, babalikan natin yung proportionality. Ano lang may kailangan natin malaman during interview? Di ba? Again, for the purpose of recruitment. Yun naman siya. So, parang kailangan ba natin malaman ilan yung naging ex niya? Siguro naman hindi. Di ba? Kailangan ba natin ano ba yung mga medyo absurd na kailangan ba natin malaman sino nakaaway niya nung high school? Siguro naman hindi na, di ba? Medyo absurd, di ba? It's far-flung questions. Pero it goes back to proportionality. What's the purpose for asking these questions and collecting these information from the applicants? So, as long as we have purposes for them, yun, okay lang naman. Pero ma'am, siguro, we need to review yung recruitment process natin. Conduct the risk assessment, which we'll be explaining in a while. Pagdating sa mga process natin that involves personal data. Para malaman natin kung sapat nga ba, sobra yung information na kinukuha natin from our data subjects. So, yun siya. Again, it's proportionality. Ano ba yung purpose natin for collecting these information? Charm?
Okay. Tsaka sir, to add, in my observation, minsan kung do sa part ng nag-i-interview pa lang, yung mga tanong parang tanggap na. Siguro let's also check in the risk assessment na kung sobra ba yung hinihingi natin at such an early stage. Ayun.
Yes.
From AMC, how do we inform to the employee concerning his or her data being asked by a certain individual? Is it in a form of email, official memo, call and text will suffice? Or do we need to have a form wherein employee will be informed and allows to disclose his or her information?
How do you inform the
How do
employee
we...
concerning his or data being asked by a certain individual? Sige. sige, to answer that, yung quick answer that, consent needs to be documented. Di ba? Electronically man, may papel na pinirmahan, recorded, an email, as long as it's documented, that's consent. Kasi pag verbally lang na hindi naman nasulat, di ba? Hindi naman pwedeng implied, tumungo lang siya, sige, that's not consent. Yun yung inano natin dito. I think yun yung pagkakaintindi ko dun sa question dito na paano ba masasabihan yung employee? Text lang ba? Official memo? Diba? Ang consent needs to be documented. Expressly given. Diba? So, kung memo siya, kailangan na-receive siya ng employee. Diba? Kung email siya, kailangan na na pumayag siya, na nag-reply siya. Diba? Or kung nasa kontrata. Pero it depends eh. Kasi ang tanong natin dito, sino yung certain individual? Who's that certain individual that's asking for the information? Diba? If it's not in any of our policies or provisions or the employment contract, then bakit niya kinukuha? Sino siya? Diba? Kung okay lang naman, edi i-document lang natin, pumayag ka na kinukuha na ito, kami yung bibigay. Yun.
Okay. Next question is from Mr. Sid. Are government personnel not covered by the DPA?
Sige. Ang government personnel, tao pa rin naman. So, data subject pa rin siya. So, DPA pa rin ang mga ibabaw. However, there are certain laws, di ba, that mandates the disclosure of certain information about government officials, di ba, or government personnel. Meron pa rin kasi. So, kagaya nung nakita natin sa video earlier, di ba, hindi natin, kung government official tayo, hindi natin necessarily pwede i-invoke yung right natin for privacy. If there's an investigation or something, it's an information about us that we need to disclose to the public, yun. So, may ganun siya. May limitations yung data privacy na kailangan secured pa rin naman yung pagkakatago ng information. Hindi pa rin naman dapat lahat napakita. Pero kung may ibang law na nagsabi na ito kailangan mo i-disclose, di kailangan mo i-disclose. Case in point, yung SALN, di ba? So, yun siya. Kailangan siya. Pag ganun, pag government official ka, government employee ka, I believe there are laws that states that we need to disclose them. Pero
Sir,
as an individual, as a data subject, we are still covered by the DPA. Yes,
So
sir?
to add, I think there are two ways to answer this question. So I'm not sure which of the two yung tanong niya. Kasi ang tanong po niya, are government personnel not covered by the FPA? So in the one that you responded to, personnel is a government employee as a data subject. I mean, sila yung personal data nila yung pinag-uusapan. Another way of me understanding this question, but of course correct me if I'm wrong. I think this might be connected to the earlier question na government personnel yung kukuha ng information. Therefore, siya yung receiver.
Yun. So, sa sinabi ni Charm, it's another perspective of the question. If the government agency, government personnel, is the one receiving the information, covered din tayo ng DPA. Kasi dapat, yung kinukuha natin information, kunyari kung HR yan, kung recruitment process yan ng government agency, ganoon pa rin, we still need to make sure na implemented yung mga security measures natin. Hindi necessarily siya nagli-leak. Diba? Paano yung mga employees na hindi natin kinuha? May applicants na hindi natin tinanggap. Diba? They're not necessarily government personnel. Diba? So, dapat secured pa rin. Diba? Confidential pa rin yung information. So, government agencies are covered by the law such that we still need to implement security measures. Diba? There may be some information, personal information that other laws that require us to disclose, pero generally, we still need to protect them. Yeah, so I hope that clarifies your question, sir. Parang like what Charm said, there's two perspectives, at least from what we see, there are two perspectives for this question.
Okay. I think okay na on the chat. Let me
Thank
check
you.
Facebook ng Kose.
Yung medyo
Thank you for your
wala
questions,
na.
folks, listeners.
Wala
We
na.
do hope we were able to clarify at paano, di ba? Help you understand your concerns, your questions, your challenges, di ba? Sige. With that, I'll continue my sharing my screen. Yeah. So we're done with the Q&A. So hopefully again we get to understand better, di ba? What we need to do, di ba? What we need to perform, comply, di ba? So dun tayo, babalik tayo sa sinabi na kanina yung do's, di ba? Ng HR. So dito tayo sa takeaway points natin. When I say takeaway points, these are the means according to the DPA, sa 10-point compliance framework, accountability, compliance, and ethics framework ng NPC, na how do we operationalize, di ba? The data privacy compliance requirements. Di ba? When I say operationalizing it, it's basically implementing, di ba? In our day-to-day jobs, di ba? In our functions, operations, na paano nga ba magko-comply? Ano nga ba gagawin natin? So, sa 10-point compliance framework, tayo sa kasi, we, ano ba, classified them into three. Yung isa, ano ba yung mga sinasabi ng 10-point compliance framework that relates to being a public marker for data safety, di ba? Ang data privacy compliance kasi it's already now a public marker for data safety. So how can we do that? Yung una dyan is yung sinasabi na governance. Yung say governance, when governance is mentioned, the 10-point compliance framework, this is appointing our DPO. Diba? Ano ba yung magiging compliance program natin? Our compliance strategy for adhering to the law, to the DPA. Diba? So una dyan is of course appointing a DPO. Diba? If we are required by the Circular 7001 for mandatory registration, we need to register a DPO, a data protection officer. Pag hindi, we need to appoint a DPO. Kasi again, the DPO champions the compliance of the organization, ensures that the organization is continuously complying. Okay? So yun yung sa DPO. Next is yung day-to-day natin. So in an HR perspective, di ba? Baka kailangan mag-post ng mga privacy notices, consent forms natin, di ba? When collecting personal information from applicants, di ba? Processing personal information of our employees, di ba? Naka-post yung privacy notice natin in our website, in our companies, di ba? Pero ngayon, since most likely some of us are working from home, so baka hindi muna kasi wala nang makakita ng privacy notes sa kumpanya. So yung nasa website natin, siguro. Di ba? Informing the data subjects, our applicants, di ba? Our employees primarily. So ano ba yung security measures that we have? Information that we're collecting, the purposes for collecting this information. Again, let's not commit the grave mistake of copy pasting privacy notices from other companies of similar sectors with us, similar industries with us. It needs to be tailored to our own process. And of course, yung for public data safety, external partners natin. Kamusta ba yung mga third parties natin? Diba? Especially the ones that we share information with or get information from. Diba? We outsource the processing of personal data to them, or they outsource their processing personal data to us. Diba? How are our contracts with them? Diba? Clients, service providers. Diba? Meron bang data privacy provisions, clauses in these contracts? Kung wala, baka we need to update them already. Kung hindi natin pwede update, baka we need to create data sharing agreements with these service providers. So we need to have a holistic approach to compliance. When I say holistic approach, hindi lang siya one-sided. As we will see, yan. Conducting risk assessment. Diba? Yung privacy impact assessment, yung PIA na sinasabi ng data privacy, is risk management. It's basically risk management. However, it's in the lens of or in the perspective of data protection and data privacy. Okay? So, often companies say, hindi, may risk manager na ako through my ISO, whatever. Often QMS. Diba? Sapat na yun. Hindi. Kasi yung QMS is risk management, but it has a different perspective. Diba? It focuses on delivering quality, diba? Business process improvement, I believe, So, pagdating sa data privacy, it focuses on protecting personal data that you're processing, di ba? Ensuring yung CIA, di ba? Yung uh, conforming to the principles of data privacy and upholding the rights of data subjects. So when I say organization, right, we need to craft our privacy manuals. Again, let's not, it's a bad habit of most companies to just copy paste privacy manuals, get parang may kilala, so yung privacy manual ka, pingin ko na, yan ang gagawin ko. That's uh, a great example of a very big mistake, diba? Or a bad idea. Let's not do that because it needs to be tailored to our companies. Diba? We need to mention in our privacy manuals the security measures we intend to implement. Diba? We intend to operationalize. That's why operationalize compliance. Plus, the privacy manual needs to be reviewed regularly. Kasi who's to say na yung mga security measures na ginawa natin ngayon, effective pa rin sila 6 months later. Diba? Yun yung gusto natin sabihin. Kasi kailangan review lagi. So, and of course, data security. Say data security, again, not having one-sided perspective na, hindi, technical lang yan, infosec lang yan, firewall, antivirus, sapat na. Hindi. At the end of the day, it's the entire organization that needs to comply to the data privacy, data protection regulations. We need to have organizational, technical, physical security measures in place. So, hindi siya policy lang, hindi siya technology lang, software, sapat na. Hindi, it's a holistic, again, it's a holistic approach to compliance. So, lastly is yung compliance is not a one-time activity. Okay? Hindi, porket natapos na tayo sa PIA, tapos na. May privacy manual tayo, tapos na. Kaya often, when I hear companies say na, compliant na ako sa data privacy, I beg to disagree. Diba? I respectfully disagree to them. Kasi when you say compliant na ako sa data privacy, you're done with your compliance. Unfortunately, compliance data privacy regulations is an ongoing effort. It's a journey. It's a program. It's not necessarily a project na may time-bound. Diba? It's a program. It's continuous. Diba? Kaya sabi natin kanina, the DPO ensures the continuous compliance of the company. Diba? So, pag sabi compliant na ako, mali siya. Diba? Kasi, how do you say na compliant ka na kung nagbabago yung breaches? Diba? Lagi may breach eh. Diba? Lagi we mention, nagiging creative ang magnanakaw. Diba? So when a breach happens, what do? Diba? Do we address them? We need to address them, mitigate them, and prevent them from happening. Diba? And if we fall under the criteria, conditions ng mandatory data breach notification ng Circular 1603 of NPC, we need to inform the National Privacy Commission and even our data subjects. Manage HR, sakto, di ba? For our entire topic. Di ba? When we say manage HR, it's recurrently training our employees. Di ba? The DPO, retooling the DPO, equipping the DPO for the DPO to be able to ensure the continuous compliance of the company. Okay. Pagdating sa recurring training, sige. Normally I get to ask, since tayo HR, yan, I get to ask. How often do we do earthquake drills or fire drills in a year? Siguro, pre-pandemic, malamang ngayon, mahirap na. Pre-pandemic, we do it what? Once a year? Diba? Earthquake drills, fire drills. Pero when an actual earthquake strikes back in, let's say, 2019, ng Windol, diba? Did everyone follow what we were practicing during the drills that we were conducting once a year? Diba? Hindi. Chance ay hindi. So, kasi either nalimutan or iba ginagawa, iba yung nasa isip. So, same with data privacy. If we conduct a data privacy awareness now, diba? What's our assurance na a month later, people still remember what they need to do, that they need to protect personal data? If we do an orientation now of data protection measures, diba? A month, 2 months later, who's to say that alam pa rin nila gagawin nila? So it's a recurring training. Diba? So when you say it's recurring training, like I said, in Bloom's taxonomy of learning, ano ba yung unang-una? Remember. Diba? And how do we remember? Make it regular. Diba? Yung training natin on data protection. And I believe that was under HRC. Now, for continuity, di ba? Uh, we need to regularly assess yung mga process natin. Conduct privacy impact assessment. Again, conducting privacy impact assessment is not a one-time. Hindi siya, pag nagawa mo siya, tapos na. Di ba? Kasi yung process natin change. People change. Di ba? Case in point, yung mga process natin noong 2019, malamang hindi na sila ginagawa ngayon. Diba? Either we've resorted to online, diba? We have websites to do that, or we've changed already our process. Diba? So with the change in process comes in additional risks. So we need to perform risk assessment, risk management, diba? Review our policies continuously. Diba? And lastly, uh, yung ecosystem ng privacy. It changes eh. There are new standards, diba? The National Privacy Commission regularly publishes circulars, advisories, and advisory opinions, diba? Updates on the law. We need to be aware of those. If yung mga DPOs natin, we need to be aware of those. Kunyari, ilan sa atin, if you can show of hands, attended the Privacy Awareness Week last week of the National Privacy Commission. Diba? It was a 2-day conference. Online naman, virtual, pero everyone was actually welcome to actually view or attend. Diba? The NPC even posted it in their Facebook pages, I believe. So aside from that, yung new threats, again, naging creative ang tanakaw. Hackers, diba? Yung mga threats natin, find new ways to pilfer, steal, at ngayon, hindi lang pera ang ninakaw, information, personal data. Kasi these can lead to money, diba? It's monetizing. It's not a one-time activity. So it needs to be continuous. We also mentioned the holistic data approach natin to data privacy compliance. Hindi siya technical lang, hindi siya papel lang. We don't want to fall short and get stuck with paper compliance. We need to be able to implement, diba? Operationalize our compliance, our security measures. We need to have our DPOs. Diba? We need to review our agreements. Kasi lahat to ang hinihingi ng batas. Diba? So ibabalik ko lang doon sa kanina, ano ba yung do's ng HR? It's all of these. Diba? Kung hindi tayo yung DPO, we need to help the DPO. Diba? How can the DPO perform his function better, his or her function better? Diba? Train the DPO. Diba? Inform the employee, kailangan din mag-awareness. Diba? With the help of the DPO. Review our process in HR. Diba? Review our documents. Review our company policies. Yeah, and continuously do that. Diba? Recurrently do that. Year in and year out. Kasi things change. Diba? Yun yung constant eh. The only thing constant is change. Diba? So we need to be able to perform these things regularly. With that, kung wala na kayong tanong from our Q&A earlier, I would leave you with a question. So, for your data privacy compliance, diba, in this digital environment, which path will you choose? Diba? Doon ba tayo sa willful non-compliance, paper compliance, or do we want to operationalize our compliance? Ayun, so actually, with that, thank you. Yung last slide ko is this one. So, for those of us who would like to have additional discussions with Learning Innovation Hub and Cossaint regarding your data privacy compliance, diba? Or if you want us to conduct free, sorry, ulitin ko tatlong beses yun. Free data privacy awareness sessions for your companies, you may reach out to us through these email addresses. info@cossaintconsulting.com or yung hello.learninginnovationhub@gmail.com. Cossaint and Learning Innovation Hub will be conducting future data privacy compliance info sessions similar to this one, pero we'll be focusing on other functions of the company, sales and marketing, IT, there's finance, operations, kumbaga hindi lang HR, di ba? Kasi dito HR yung perspective natin. So, and lastly, if you want, you can follow us, like, subscribe, or whatever the verb there is for these social media platforms. All right? With that, thank you. Ms. Christine? Yung video, We will be publishing it in our social media platforms. So you can, like I believe, like what Miss Christine mentioned at the start of our webinar, you can view that, diba? Download it, show it to your employees para at least it's a primer, so to speak, an introduction before an actual data privacy awareness session. Yun na po. Thank you. Salamat po. You're most welcome po for everyone who attended. Thank you. Thank you, Miss Christine. Thank you, Charm. Thank you
Thank
din po.
you. Dali, nag-ano ako sa sa chat room.
Sabihin ko sana,
Muted.
kuha tayong picture. Pero umalis na yata yung iba. Pero okay lang. Hindi rin tayo umuno consent, so okay lang. No worries. We will not be getting photos of everyone. So again, thank you for attending. We hope you understand. Hi, Miss Janice. Nandiyan ka pala. Ha, shout out to you. Thank you everyone for attending our our session webinar on data privacy. So hopefully we were able to answer, diba? Clarify your questions. Haha, yes, ma'am. I see you there. We were able to answer your questions, clarify your concerns about data privacy, and somehow help you uh, start your compliance, di ba? Kung hindi man pa tayo nagsimula, better start it now. Kung nagsimulan tayo, continue your compliance to data protection regulations. Kasi it's a continuous process, di ba? Hindi siya natatapos. So with that, thank you po. Maraming salamat. Ms. Christine? Yeah.
Thank you, Sir Ernest. Okay, I guess this ends our info session on data privacy in human resources. As I mentioned a while ago, recorded video will be uploaded to our YouTube channel this afternoon. Please like and follow our social media pages, Cosane Consulting and Learning Innovation Hub PH, and to get to know more about our latest activities. For those who are asking for certificates, kindly message in our email and we will send you certificates. We have two paid training programs. The first program is on how to conduct a privacy impact assessment, date and schedule to be announced. And for those learning and development practitioners who are interested to learn more how to design, develop, Leo, the trainee manager of the Employers Confederation of the Philippines. Again, Sir Ernest and everyone, thank you for your time. This is Christine Malones, your program facilitator this morning. I hope we see each other again. And thank you and have a great and safe weekend.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you po. Bye po.
Bye.